He was the bull moose, the trust buster, the force of nature who charged through American life, embodying the strenuous life and shaping the modern presidency. Theodore Roosevelt demanded greatness from himself and his nation. But the untold story is the immense, often brutal price his 6 children paid for that relentless drive, a legacy forged in dazzling privilege, but marked by unimaginable tragedy, heroic sacrifice, and quiet rebellion. What truly became of the heirs to the Roosevelt name? The princess, the war heroes, the restless explorer, the dutiful daughter, the lost aviator. After the Rough Rider left the stage. Welcome. You clicked on this video because you know the larger-than-life president, the man whose energy reshaped America, but you sense the real human drama lies within the extraordinary family he raised. In this exhaustive, deeply researched documentary, we will tell the complete multi-generational and largely untold story of all 6 of Theodore Roosevelt's children. We will explore the dazzling, defiant life of his firstborn daughter, Alice Lee Roosevelt Longworth, from his brief first marriage. We will delve into the intertwined destinies of the 5 children from his long second marriage to Edith Carow, the dutiful son and war hero Theodore Ted Roosevelt Jr., the brilliant but troubled explorer Kermit Roosevelt, the competent and steadying daughter Ethel Carow Roosevelt Derby, the twice-wounded soldier and businessman Archie Bullock Roosevelt, and the beloved youngest son Quentin Roosevelt, whose fate would break his father's heart. To bring you this incredible, sprawling family saga, we have gone far beyond the presidential histories and the familiar anecdotes of the White House gang. We have meticulously researched TR's own voluminous writings and letters, analyzed the memoirs and biographies of his children, particularly Alice and Ted Jr., consulted detailed WWI and WWOOP military records, historical archives, and contemporary accounts spanning nearly a century. This is not just a superficial, "where are they now?" It is a deep, unflinching exploration of the profound impact, the burdens, and the blessings of growing up Roosevelt. It's a story about living up to the ideal of the strenuous life, about unimaginable sacrifice, political ambition, personal demons, and the 6 individuals who navigated one of the most dynamic and consequential legacies in American history. Prepare to understand the full, complex, and deeply human story behind the Roosevelt heirs. Number 6, the rebel princess, Alice Lee Roosevelt Longworth. The Roosevelt children's story begins with a birth immediately followed by devastating tragedy, creating a daughter who was both a cherished link to a lost love and a perpetual outsider within her father's second family. She would become Princess Alice, the original American celebrity, captivating the world with her beauty, wit, and fearless rebellion against the very conventions her powerful father represented. Born on February 12, 1884, Alice Lee Roosevelt's arrival was tragically intertwined with loss. Her mother, Theodore Roosevelt's beautiful, beloved son, first wife Alice Hathaway Lee, died just 2 days later from kidney failure exacerbated by childbirth. On the very same day, in the same house, TR's own mother, Martha "Mitty" Bullock Roosevelt, also passed away from typhoid fever. This double blow devastated the young Theodore, then a rising star in New York politics. In his diary, he famously marked the day with a large X and wrote, "The light has gone out of my life." Unable to cope with the infant who reminded him so intensely of his lost love, he briefly entrusted Alice to the care of his older sister, Anna "Bamie" Roosevelt, and fled west to the Badlands of Dakota Territory to grieve and reinvent himself as a rancher. This traumatic beginning fundamentally shaped Alice's relationship with her father and her place within the family. When TR remarried in 1886 to his childhood friend Edith Kermit Carow and began raising a new family, Alice remained a somewhat separate entity. Edith, while providing responsible care, reportedly found Alice difficult and willful, a constant reminder of her husband's passionate first love. TR himself, perhaps due to the painful association with his first wife or his focus on his new brood, often kept an emotional distance, treating her more like a challenging contemporary than a daughter. Alice grew up feeling both adored as a symbol of her beautiful mother and slightly estranged within the boisterous household of her half-siblings at Sagamore Hill, the family's Long Island estate. She developed a fierce independence, a sharp intellect inherited from her father, and a cutting wit that would become her trademark, her defense mechanism. When Theodore Roosevelt became president in 1901, following McKinley's assassination, the 17-year-old Alice burst onto the national stage. Unconventional, beautiful, and utterly unrestrained by the decorum expected of a first daughter, she became an instant sensation. The press dubbed her Princess Alice. She smoked cigarettes publicly, sometimes reportedly on the White House roof, drove her own car unchaperoned at high speeds, placed bets with bookies, carried a pet garter snake named Emily Spinach in her purse, and offered sharp, often R-rated opinions on politics and society. Her signature pale blue gown sparked a fashion craze for Alice Blue. She was the original it girl. Her every move documented, celebrated, and sometimes criticized. She was a proto-celebrity in an age before mass media saturation. Her father, famously exasperated, but also secretly proud, reportedly quipped, "I can either run the country or I can attend to Alice, but I cannot possibly do both." He understood her rebellious spirit mirrored his own youthful energy, but her flagrant disregard for convention often clashed with the dignity of his office. He refused to curtail her, however, recognizing her immense popularity and perhaps his own complicity in her creation. She served as an unofficial goodwill ambassador traveling to Cuba, Puerto Rico, Japan, China, and the Philippines on a major diplomatic tour in 1905 with then Secretary of War William Howard Taft, charming dignitaries and generating positive press. In 1906, she married Nicholas Longworth III, a prominent Republican congressman from Ohio, in a lavish White House wedding that was the social event of the decade, attended by over 1,000 guests. Longworth would eventually rise to become Speaker of the House. Their marriage, however, was complex and often strained. Longworth was known for his own affairs and heavy drinking, and Alice embarked on a long, well-known, and barely concealed affair with Senator William Borah of Idaho. Her only child, Paulina Longworth, born in 1925, was widely acknowledged, though never publicly confirmed by Alice, to be Borah's daughter. Alice's scandals were numerous and legendary. Her smoking, her driving, her sharp tongue, the other Washington Monument, her affairs, her political maneuvering. But these were less scandals in the modern sense and more expressions of her deliberate defiance of societal norms. She turned rebellion into an art form, using her wit and social position to influence politics and culture from the sidelines. After her husband's death in 1931, Alice remained a towering figure in Washington, D.C. society for the next half-century. Her Georgetown home became a salon for politicians, journalists, and diplomats. She was famed for her acerbic wit, her insightful political commentary, often critical of her own Roosevelt cousins, Franklin and Eleanor, whom she famously disliked, and her famous embroidered sofa pillow that read, "If you can't say something good about someone, sit right here by me." She remained a staunch Republican, though her political views were often iconoclastic. She wrote a best-selling autobiography, Crowded Hours, in 1933. The untold story of Alice Roosevelt Longworth is perhaps the sheer longevity and consistency of her carefully crafted public persona. She was the daughter who felt abandoned and responded by commanding the world's attention. She turned her perceived otherness into a source of power, becoming a uniquely American aristocrat whose influence stemmed not from inherited titles, but from her intelligence, charisma, and fearless refusal to be ignored. She lived until 1980, dying at the age of 96, a living link to a bygone era forever. Princess Alice, the ultimate testament to the indomitable Roosevelt spirit, expressed on her own defiant terms. Alice carved her own path through rebellion and social influence, remaining largely outside her father's direct sphere of political and military ambition. But the first son of TR's second marriage would feel the full weight of that legacy, driven by a powerful sense of duty, to not just live up to the Roosevelt name, but to surpass it on the battlefield and in the halls of power. Number 5. The dutiful son, the war hero, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. Next came the namesake, the eldest son of the president, burdened with the expectation of following in the footsteps of a giant. He would spend his life driven by a relentless sense of duty to his father, his country, and the Roosevelt legacy, becoming a decorated war hero, a colonial governor, and a man who ultimately sacrificed everything on the beaches of Normandy, finally earning the ultimate recognition his father had always craved for him. Born on September 13, 1887, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., known as Ted, was the first child of Theodore and Edith Roosevelt. As the eldest son, he bore the direct weight of his father's name and immense expectations. He grew up during TR's rapid political ascent, spending his formative years at Sagamore Hill, and later his teenage years in the White House. He was a central figure in the boisterous White House gang, known for their high-spirited antics but always conscious of his position as the president's son. TR instilled in all his children, but perhaps most intensely in Ted, the doctrine of the strenuous life, the importance of physical courage, intellectual rigor, and public service. Ted followed the expected path for a Roosevelt Scion Groton School and then Harvard University, graduating in 1909. He entered the business world, achieving success in investment banking and the carpet industry, demonstrating an aptitude his father often lacked. He married Eleanor Butler Alexander in 1910, starting his own family. However, the call to public service ingrained since childhood was strong. He became involved in Republican politics in New York, serving in the New York State Assembly. His life, like that of his entire generation, was irrevocably altered by World War I. When the U.S. entered the conflict in 1917, Ted, along with his brothers Kermit, Archie, and Quentin, immediately volunteered for service, embodying their father's fervent patriotism. Commissioned as a major, Ted went to France with the 1st Division, the Big Red One. He distinguished himself in combat, leading troops from the front, refusing staff positions, suffering injuries, including gas exposure and a severe leg wound at the Battle of Soissons that left him with a permanent limp and required the use of a cane, and demonstrating extraordinary bravery. He rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel and was highly decorated, receiving the Distinguished Service Cross and the French Croix de Guerre. His combat leadership earned him the respect of his men and superiors, proving he was more than just the former president's son. However, this service came at a cost. The war claimed the life of his youngest brother Quentin, a devastating blow to the family. After the war, Ted returned to politics and public life. He was a co-founder of the American Legion, advocating for veterans' rights. He served as Assistant Secretary of the Navy from 1921 to 1924 under Presidents Harding and Coolidge, a position his father had famously used as a springboard. He ran for governor of New York in 1924, but was defeated by Al Smith, partly due to scandals within the Harding administration, though he himself was not implicated, and perhaps his own less charismatic political style compared to his father or his cousin Franklin D. Roosevelt. His subsequent career involved colonial administration. He was appointed governor of Puerto Rico, 1929 to 1932, and later Governor-General of the Philippines, 1932 to 1933. His tenures were marked by efforts to improve local conditions, foster relationships, and learn local languages, though operating within the complex and often fraught context of American colonial rule. He also continued his business career and remained active in civic life. However, the defining chapter of Ted Roosevelt Jr.'s life was yet to come. Despite his age, mid-50s, and physical limitations, the lingering effects of his WWI injuries, arthritis, and a heart condition. When the United States entered World War II, Ted again volunteered for combat duty. Initially sidelined due to his health, he relentlessly lobbied his superiors, including his friend General George S. Patton, for a frontline command. He eventually secured a position as Assistant Division Commander of the 4th Infantry Division, using his extensive combat experience from the previous war. His most legendary act occurred on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., aged 56, was the only general officer and the oldest man to land with the first wave of troops on the beaches of Normandy. His landing craft drifted significantly off course due to smoke and currents, landing about a mile south of the intended objective on Utah Beach. Faced with chaos, heavy enemy fire, and troops pinned down, Ted calmly assessed the situation. Realizing the initial landing zone was heavily fortified, he made the quick, decisive command: "We'll start the war from right here." Armed only with a cane and a pistol, he personally directed troop movements off the beach, walking calmly under fire, reorganizing units, coordinating artillery support, and directing them towards their revised objectives inland. His courage, leadership, and utter disregard for his own safety were credited by numerous witnesses, including General Omar Bradley, with saving the landing at Utah Beach from potential disaster. Tragically, just over a month later, on July 12, 1944, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. died of a massive heart attack in Normandy. His relentless drive, the physical toll of his D-Day exertions, and his underlying heart condition had finally overwhelmed him. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on Utah Beach, the highest military decoration his father had always coveted, but never received. Tr. Sr. His Medal of Honor for San Juan Hill was awarded posthumously decades later in 2001. He was buried in the American Cemetery in Normandy, next to his brother Quentin. Ted Jr.'s scandals were minor political setbacks rather than personal controversies. The untold story is the lifelong immense pressure of being Theodore Roosevelt's son and namesake, and the extraordinary lengths he went to in order to live up to that legacy, particularly through military valor. He spent his life embodying the strenuous life, pushing himself relentlessly, arguably to the point of his own demise. His Medal of Honor, earned under fire on D-Day, was the ultimate validation, a moment where the son arguably surpassed the father in the arena Tr. valued most. His life is a powerful, poignant saga of duty, courage, and the complex relationship between a famous father and his firstborn son. Ted Roosevelt Jr. found his ultimate validation on the battlefield, embodying the heroic ideal. But his younger brother, equally brilliant and adventurous, would find the strenuous life led him down a different, darker path marked by exploration, literary ambition, and a lifelong battle with inner demons. Number 4. The restless explorer, the tormented soul, Kermit Roosevelt. Next came the second son, the intellectual adventurer, the one who shared his father's love for literature and the wild unknown. He would journey to the darkest corners of the globe, face unimaginable perils alongside his legendary father, and achieve success in business and writing. But his strenuous life would be a constant battle against a profound inner darkness, a struggle that would ultimately consume him. Born on October 10, 1889, Kermit Roosevelt was the second son of Theodore and Edith. Perhaps more than any other child, Kermit seemed to inherit his father's wide-ranging intellectual curiosity and adventurous spirit. He was a sensitive, literary-minded boy who nonetheless felt the pressure to live up to the family's code of physical courage and vigorous action. He attended Groton and Harvard like his older brother Ted, but his passions leaned more towards literature languages. He was reportedly fluent in several and exploration. His defining youthful experience was accompanying his father on the year-long Smithsonian Roosevelt African expedition in 1909, shortly after Tr. left the presidency. Kermit, just graduated from Harvard, served as the official photographer and naturalist, documenting the massive safari that collected thousands of specimens for the Smithsonian Institution. This shared adventure cemented their bond and showcased Kermit's own capabilities in the field. An even more intense and nearly fatal shared experience followed. In 1913 to 1914, Kermit joined his father on the perilous Roosevelt-Rondon scientific expedition to map the unexplored River of Doubt, later renamed Rio Roosevelt, in the Brazilian Amazon. The expedition was a brutal ordeal. They faced treacherous rapids, hostile indigenous tribes, disease Tr. nearly died from a severe leg infection, and malaria, begging Kermit to leave him behind, starvation, and the immense psychological toll of the jungle. Kermit's resilience, resourcefulness, and unwavering support were credited with saving his father's life. He emerged from the jungle a seasoned explorer, having proven his courage under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. He documented the harrowing journey in his book, The Happy Hunting Grounds. Like his brothers, Kermit served bravely in World War I. Refusing a safe staff position, he joined the British Army before the U.S. entered the war, using connections to bypass neutrality laws, and served with distinction as a captain in the Mesopotamian campaign, modern-day Iraq, earning the British Military Cross for gallantry in action. He later transferred to the U.S. Army when America joined the war. After the war, Kermit embarked on a varied and initially successful career. He founded the Roosevelt Steamship Company and later the United States Lines, becoming a significant figure in the shipping industry. He also co-founded the first transatlantic airline, which eventually became Pan Am. He continued his explorations, traveling to the Himalayas and Central Asia, searching for the legendary Yeti and writing several more books about his adventures and wildlife conservation. He married Belle Wyatt Willard, daughter of the U.S. ambassador to Spain in 1914, and they had 4 children. To the outside world, he seemed to be successfully embodying the multifaceted Roosevelt ideal. Businessman, explorer, author, war veteran. However, beneath the surface, Kermit wrestled with profound inner demons. He suffered from severe depression and alcoholism struggles that intensified over the years. The exact roots of his torment are complex. Perhaps the psychological scars of the river of doubt, the pressures of the family legacy, a possible bipolar disorder, the grief over his brother Quentin's death. But the impact was devastating. His business ventures became increasingly erratic, marked by financial difficulties. His personal life grew strained under the weight of his drinking and mood swings. He reportedly felt the weight of comparison not only to his father, but also to his seemingly more successful older brother Ted. With the outbreak of World War II, Kermit, despite his age, early 50s, and deteriorating health again, sought military service driven by the same sense of duty. He initially rejoined the British Army, but was discharged for health reasons related to his alcoholism. Undeterred, he managed to secure a commission in the U.S. Army, using his father's name and connections. He served as an intelligence officer in Alaska, tasked with establishing a militia of Eskimo scouts. But the isolation, the harsh conditions, his declining health, and his ongoing battle with alcohol and depression proved too much. On June 4, 1943, while stationed at Fort Richardson, Alaska, Kermit Roosevelt died by suicide, shooting himself. He was 53 years old. The official cause of death was initially obscured by the military out of respect for the family, but the truth eventually emerged. Kermit's scandal was the private tragedy of his mental illness and alcoholism, culminating in his suicide. A stark, heartbreaking contrast to the family's image of boundless vigor. The untold story of Kermit Roosevelt is the story of the brilliant, sensitive son who perhaps felt the pressures of the strenuous life most acutely and tragically. He scaled mountains, explored uncharted rivers, fought in wars, and built businesses, yet could not conquer the darkness within. His life is a poignant reminder of the hidden vulnerabilities that can exist even within the most outwardly successful and adventurous lives, and the devastating toll that depression and addiction can take even on a Roosevelt. Kermit's life was a tragic trajectory of adventure and inner turmoil. But his younger sister, the only daughter of the second marriage, would navigate the same demanding legacy with a different kind of strength. Quiet competence, unwavering loyalty, and a dedication to holding the sprawling, often chaotic family together. Number 3. The dutiful daughter. The family anchor, Ethel Carow Roosevelt Derby. Amidst the whirlwind of rebellious Alice and the boisterous boys of the White House gang, there was the second daughter, the quiet anchor. While her brothers chased adventure, war, and political glory, she would embody a different kind of Roosevelt strength. Organizational skill, unwavering loyalty, and a lifelong dedication to service, both to her country and to the often demanding needs of her famous family. Born on August 13, 1891, Ethel Carow Roosevelt Derby was the 4th child of Theodore and Edith and the only daughter of their union. Growing up amidst the controlled chaos of Sagamore Hill and later the White House, Ethel developed a reputation for being the most organized, responsible, and perhaps least overtly rebellious of the Roosevelt children, excluding the very young Quentin. While her older half-sister Alice courted headlines with flamboyant behavior, Ethel seemed more focused on managing the complex social and logistical demands of being part of the first family. She reportedly helped her mother Edith with social duties, acted as a hostess during White House events, and served as a steadying influence on her younger brothers. She received her education at home and later attended the National Cathedral School in Washington, D.C. In 1913, she married Dr. Richard Derby, a surgeon, in a relatively modest by Roosevelt standards ceremony at Oyster Bay near Sagamore Hill. Their marriage would prove to be long and stable, a contrast to the marital complexities faced by some other members of the family, lasting until his death nearly 5 decades later. Like her brothers, Ethel felt a strong call to duty during World War I. While her husband served as a surgeon in the American Expeditionary Forces in France, Ethel herself went overseas, volunteering as a Red Cross nurse. She worked tirelessly in a surgical hospital near the front lines, demonstrating remarkable courage and dedication in the face of horrific conditions. Her service was not a symbolic gesture. It was demanding dangerous work, nursing severely wounded soldiers, and she earned accolades for her competence and compassion. This wartime nursing experience was a defining period, showcasing her embodiment of the Roosevelt ideal of service and sacrifice in a practical, hands-on way. After the war, Ethel settled into a life focused on her family. She and Richard had 4 children and civic engagement largely outside the national political spotlight that her brother Ted sometimes occupied. However, she played a crucial, often unseen role within the Roosevelt family itself. She became a key figure in preserving the family home Sagamore Hill. After her mother Edith's death, working closely with the Roosevelt Memorial Association, later the Theodore Roosevelt Association, to ensure its maintenance and eventual designation as a National Historic Site. She was in many ways the keeper of the family's physical history and traditions, meticulously cataloging items and overseeing the preservation efforts. She also served as a vital link between the different branches and generations of the sprawling Roosevelt clan, maintaining connections and acting as a source of stability. Her home often served as a gathering place. While Alice held court in Washington with political commentary, Ethel maintained the family's center of gravity on Long Island, embodying a quieter, more domestic form of influence. Ethel Derby lived a long life, largely avoiding public controversy or scandal. She maintained a dignified public presence when required, often representing the family at historical commemorations or events related to her father's legacy. She passed away in 1977 at the age of 86. The untold story of Ethel Roosevelt Derby is the story of quiet competence and enduring loyalty. In a family defined by larger-than-life personalities and dramatic public acts, she represented a different kind of strength, the strength of organization, dedication, and unwavering commitment to family and duty. She wasn't the rebel, the war hero, or the tragic figure. She was the anchor, the one who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to preserve the family's history and maintain its cohesion. Her life demonstrates that the strenuous life could also be lived through dedicated service, compassionate care, and the vital, often unheralded work of holding a family together. Ethel provided the quiet anchor, dedicating her life to service and family preservation. Her younger brother, however, would face the crucible of war head-on, not once but twice, emerging wounded but unbowed, carrying the Roosevelt spirit of resilience into the world of business and conservative politics. Number 2. The twice wounded soldier. The conservative activist, Archie Bullock. Roosevelt. Next came the third son of the second marriage, another child raised in the whirlwind of the White House, instilled with the same code of courage and duty. His life would be dramatically marked by the crucible of war, suffering grievous wounds in one conflict, only to volunteer again for the next, ultimately channeling the Roosevelt energy into the worlds of international business and staunch conservative activism. Born on April 9, 1894, Archibald Bullock. Roosevelt, known as Archie, was the third son and fifth child overall. He grew up as an integral part of the boisterous White House gang, known for his energy and occasional mischief, including famously bringing his pony Algonquin up the White House elevator to visit his sick brother Quentin. Like his older brothers, he followed the path through Groton and Harvard, steeped in the traditions and expectations of the East Coast elite and the Roosevelt dynasty. When World War I erupted, Archie, like his brothers Ted, Kermit, and Quentin, answered the call immediately and with patriotic fervor. He served as an infantry officer in the 1st Division in France. His combat record was marked by extraordinary bravery and devastating injury. In March 1918, during intense fighting, Captain Archie Roosevelt was severely wounded by enemy shell fire while leading his men. His left arm was shattered and one knee was badly injured, leaving him with permanent disabilities. He spent months in agonizing recovery. For his heroism in this action and others, he was awarded the French Croix de Guerre with palms and was cited for gallantry by his American commanders. He was medically discharged due to the severity of his wounds. His father, T.R., was immensely proud of his son's courage but deeply worried by the extent of his injuries. After the war, despite his physical limitations, Archie embarked on a successful career in business. He worked for the Sinclair Consolidated Oil Company, spending time in its Russian operations before the revolution fully took hold. He later co-founded the investment banking firm Roosevelt & Son, a revival of an earlier family firm, and became involved in international shipping and finance. He demonstrated a shrewd business sense and built a prosperous life for himself and his family. He married Grace Lockwood in 1917, and they had 4 children. However, the call to duty sounded again. When the United States entered World War II, Archie, despite being in his late 40s and still suffering from his WWI disabilities, volunteered for service. This time, leveraging his experience and connections, he secured a commission as a lieutenant colonel. In a remarkable display of courage mirroring his brother Ted's determination, Archie insisted on a combat role. He served with the 162nd Infantry Regiment in the incredibly brutal New Guinea campaign against the Japanese. In 1943, during fierce fighting, he was wounded again, this time by a Japanese grenade, injuring the same leg that had been damaged in WWE. This second combat wound earned him a Silver Star for gallantry. He was eventually medically evacuated and retired from the Army with the rank of colonel. Archie and his brother Ted remain one of the only pairs of siblings in American history to have both received medical discharges for wounds suffered in combat in 2 different wars. After World War II, Archie returned to his investment banking career. He also became increasingly involved in conservative political causes. While his father was a progressive Republican and his cousin FDR led the Democratic Party, Archie aligned himself with the right wing of the Republican Party. He was a staunch anti-communist and a vocal supporter of figures like Senator Joseph McCarthy and Barry Goldwater. He co-founded the Veritas Foundation, which aimed to investigate alleged communist influences at universities like Harvard. This later-life political activism placed him distinctly apart from the more liberal branches of the Roosevelt family, highlighting the ideological diversity within the dynasty. Archie Roosevelt lived a long life, passing away in 1979 at the age of 85. His scandal was non-existent. The untold story of Archie Roosevelt is the story of extraordinary resilience and unwavering adherence to his own interpretation of the Roosevelt Code. He faced devastating injury in one war only to volunteer for another, demonstrating a physical and moral courage that deeply impressed his father and echoed the family's strenuous life ethos. His subsequent turn towards staunch conservatism highlights the diverse political paths the Roosevelt legacy could inspire. He was the quiet warrior, the successful businessman, the ideological activist, a son who bore the physical scars of his service and carried the family name with unwavering conviction. Archie survived the crucible of 2 wars, carrying his wounds with quiet dignity. But the final son, the youngest, and perhaps the most beloved, would find his strenuous life led him to the skies, only to meet a tragic end that would irrevocably break his father's indomitable spirit. Number 1, the Golden Boy. The fallen aviator, Quentin Roosevelt, and finally the youngest son, the baby of the boisterous White House clan, the one who most embodied his father's boundless enthusiasm and zest for life. Destined for greatness, he took to the skies as one of America's first combat pilots, only to become the ultimate sacrifice. The Golden Boy who fell from the clouds, leaving behind a grief that would shadow his legendary father's final days. Born on November 19, 1897, Quentin Roosevelt was the youngest of Theodore and Edith's children. He spent his formative years, ages 4 to 11, living in the White House, the heart and soul of the White House gang. He was known for his intelligence, his mechanical aptitude. He reportedly once correctly diagnosed a problem with the presidential car, his mischievous humor, and his close bond with his father, who saw in Quentin perhaps the brightest reflection of his own energetic spirit. Anecdotes abound of Quentin's White House escapades. Roller skating in the halls, carving a baseball diamond on the lawn, smuggling the pony Algonquin into the elevator to visit his sick brother Archie. He was the adored youngest child, raised in the unique crucible of presidential power and paternal expectation. Like his brothers, he attended Groton and was accepted to Harvard. However, the outbreak of World War I interrupted his studies. Fueled by the same intense patriotism that drove his brothers and encouraged by his ardently pro-Allied father, who fiercely criticized President Wilson's initial neutrality, Quentin left Harvard in 1917 to join the newly formed U.S. Army Air Service. Aviation was a new, glamorous, and incredibly dangerous frontier, perfectly suited to the Roosevelt spirit of adventure and risk. He trained as a pilot and was sent to France. Quentin quickly distinguished himself as a skilled and daring pilot assigned to the 95th Aero Squadron, part of the 1st Pursuit Group. He engaged in numerous aerial combats, demonstrating courage and a cheerful determination that made him popular with his fellow pilots. He was credited with shooting down a German plane in July 1918. His letters home were filled with the excitement and the grim realities of aerial warfare. His father followed his progress with immense pride and equally immense anxiety. TR, who had desperately wanted to lead troops himself, but was denied by President Wilson, poured his own frustrated martial ambitions into his son's service. Quentin, the youngest, the aviator, perhaps carried the heaviest weight of those expectations. On July 14, 1918, Bastille Day, 2nd Lieutenant Quentin Roosevelt was flying a Newport 28 fighter plane over Kermit, France, near the Marne River during the Second Battle of the Marne. He engaged in combat with several German Fokker D-7 fighters. Outnumbered and outgunned, his plane was shot down behind enemy lines. He was killed instantly, struck by 2 machine gun bullets to the head. He was only 20 years old. The Germans recovered his body and, recognizing his famous name, buried him with full military honors near where he fell. News of his death sent shockwaves through the Allied forces and back home in the United States. For Theodore Roosevelt, the loss was utterly devastating. Friends and family reported that Quentin's death broke his father's spirit. The once seemingly indestructible bull moose, already weakened by the lingering effects of his Amazon expedition and the political disappointments of recent years, seemed to age overnight. He carried on publicly speaking about Quentin's sacrifice with patriotic pride, the eaglet that flew highest. But privately, he was consumed by grief. Theodore Roosevelt himself died less than 6 months later, in January 1919. Many believed he died of a broken heart, unable to recover from the loss of his youngest, brightest son. Quentin Roosevelt's scandal was the ultimate sacrifice of war. His untold story is the story of the golden boy who embodied the family's ideals of courage and service, perhaps too perfectly. He was the bright flame extinguished too soon, his death becoming a symbol of the generation lost in the Great War. His fate cast a long, tragic shadow over the Roosevelt family, a stark reminder of the brutal cost of the strenuous life his father had championed. He remains the beloved youngest son, forever frozen in time, as the daring young aviator who fell from the sky. The 6 lives branching from the force of nature that was Theodore Roosevelt tell an extraordinary American epic, a saga of privilege and pressure, heroism and heartbreak, rebellion and resilience, all lived under the immense weight of the Roosevelt name and the ideal of the strenuous life. Their story underscores the profound impact, for better and for worse, that a towering presidential figure can have on the lives of his children. This theme resonates powerfully with the story of another family defined by presidential power, charisma, and tragedy. That family was, of course, the Kennedys. On this channel previously, we explored the fascinating and often heartbreaking story of John F. Kennedy's children. Did you know that behind the Camelot myth lies a tale of unimaginable loss, intense public scrutiny, and the divergent paths of America's Prince, John Jr., whose life ended in tragic echo, and his sister Caroline, the quiet survivor, who became the sole guardian of the flame. The full tragic and glamorous story of the Kennedy children is one you will not want to miss. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover that incredible, untold story. And, as always, thank you for watching.